Daniel Sports Center, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the 2022 New Orleans Bowl matchup between the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers and the South Alabama Jaguars. Both teams have had great seasons getting to this point. You got Western Kentucky, who finished off the regular season at 8-5. This team is one of the best teams in the Conference USA this season, and they're taking on South Alabama, who's having by far the best season that they've ever had in the FBS. They're up to 10 wins, currently 10-2 on the season, and I mean, South Alabama, they've been in the FBS for right around 10 years. They have never gotten above 6 wins. The last time that they even made it to a bowl game was 2016. So this has been a great season for them, and this should make for a good matchup. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on the New Orleans Bowl here today, starting out with their team trends. Western Kentucky beat Florida Atlantic 32-31 was the final score there. That was a close game, went into overtime, but Western Kentucky got the win in the end. And once again, they finished out the season at 8-5. Barely missed out on the Conference USA Championship game. They lost to North Texas back in late October. Turns out North Texas finished out at 6-2 in conference, which was the same as Western Kentucky. Both teams were 6-2 in conference this season, but due to a tiebreaker, North Texas advanced to the Conference USA Championship instead of Western Kentucky. But either way, it's still been a great season for the Hilltoppers, getting up to an 8-5 record. And as for South Alabama, they beat Old Dominion to finish out the regular season, beating them 27-20. They're kind of in a similar situation in comparison to the Hilltoppers when it comes to the conference championship. I mean, South Alabama, in my mind, was definitely the second best team in the Sun Belt this season. I mean, the other division had James Madison and Coastal Carolina, who had good seasons, but I mean, the division that South Alabama's in also had Troy. Turns out Troy finished out the season with a 7-1 conference record. So did South Alabama, but Troy beat the Jaguars during the season, which gave them the tiebreaker over South Alabama. So both teams barely missed out on their conference championships, and quite honestly, if either team would have made it to the conference championship for their respective conference, I do think one or both of these teams would have won their conferences outright, just based on how solid a seasons both teams have had. Games will be on Wednesday, December 21st, New Orleans, Louisiana. Your kickoff is 9 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going with South Alabama by 4.5. Over-under is 56, but the FBI is disagreeing with the spread, going with Western Kentucky 58.7%. So it's one of those rare occasions where you got the spread and the FBI disagreeing with each other. Series history: South Alabama leads at 1-0. That game was back in 2013. Stat comparison for this one: Western Kentucky is 17th in points per game, 35th in points allowed. This is a strong team in the passing game. They're second in the country in pass yards a game. You got Austin Reed, who has had a great season for Western Kentucky, and that's kind of what the Hilltoppers have been the past few years, is a big air raid team. They had Bailey Zappi, who passed for like 5,500 yards last year. He had a great season, and now you got Austin Reed in there, who's kind of had similar results. I mean, 4,200 yards. He hasn't quite hit that mark. He's still a young quarterback, so I think with time he can reach that point. But I mean, he's led this team to a great season. He doesn't turn over the ball too much, even though he definitely could work on throwing less interceptions. But either way, I mean, 36 touchdowns to 10 picks is still a pretty impressive ratio. And the rushing game, they're 67th, and then for yards allowed, 71st in passing, 69th in rushing. And as for South Alabama, this team is a strong defensive team, even though on offense they've gotten by as well. They're 39th in points per game, 14th in points allowed. They're 45th in passers a game, 57th in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 62nd in passing, 4th in rushing. So a very strong rush defense here in South Alabama. They've only allowed an average of 89 rush yards a game, but you're going up against a team that's primarily a passing offense. So that's probably not going to be quite as big of an advantage as if, for example, you were playing against a really a big time rushing team. Then maybe we'd be talking about an advantage for the Jaguars, but not really in this case, because once again, I mean, Western Kentucky is dominantly a passing offense. They're an air raid offense. Your recent matchups: Western Kentucky, they beat Florida Atlantic 32-31 in overtime. They lost Auburn the week before 17-41 on the road. They beat Rice 45-10, beat Charlotte 59-7, a couple of dominant wins there. Lost to North Texas 13-40, so a little bit of inconsistency down the stretch for Western Kentucky. Got those two dominant wins over Rice and Charlotte, two impressive wins there. kind of sandwiched in between two bad losses. You lost to North Texas 40-30, lost to Auburn 41-17. Even though that Auburn loss really wasn't that important because it's a non-conference game, but yeah, that North Texas game was very important because you beat North Texas, you're in the Conference USA Championship, but in the end, it just didn't work out for the Hilltoppers. But as for South Alabama, they beat Old Dominion 27-20, beat Southern Miss by the same score, 27-20. They beat Texas State 38-21, beat Georgia Southern 38-31, and also beat Arkansas State 31-3. So they've been a really good team down the stretch. I mean, South Alabama, they've only taken 2 losses, and those 2 losses were really close ones. You lost to UCLA by 1 and lost to Troy by 4. So this team, you flip a couple of those close losses, those 2 close losses, suddenly this team is 12-0 and is probably more than likely playing in a New Year's Six bowl game right now. But those, you also got to consider too, you got a couple of close wins as well that fell your way, so it kind of balances out in the end. Your key points for this one: Western Kentucky 8-5. They got a true air raid offense with Austin Reed. We saw this with Bailey Zappi as well, who is now in the NFL. But yeah, Austin Reed has done a good job and he's had a good season. They are a well-rounded team on both sides of the ball. They've taken 3 close losses and 2 ugly ones. Yeah, if you look at those 5 losses, I mean, there's a difference. You got 3 close ones, and obviously the two blowouts to North Texas and then to Auburn. But as for South Alabama, this is by far the Jaguars' best season in the FBS. Their first season in the FBS was in 2012, and since then they really haven't had much success. I mean, they got up to 6 wins 3 times since 2012. They have never gotten past 6 wins. They've also never won a bowl game. So this is their 3rd bowl game that they've played since 2012, and this is a huge opportunity for the Jaguars to get that first bowl win. And so it's a huge game for them, and obviously for Western Kentucky as well, who's had a good season. So that's it. Let's get to the prediction here for Western Kentucky and South Alabama coming up here in the New Orleans Bowl. And I'll be going with Western Kentucky to win this one 34-31. This was really tough one to predict. You got 2 teams that have had great seasons. You got South Alabama, who's had the best season of their school in the FBS. And as much as I might want to pick South Alabama here, I like this team and how they play down the stretch. I just think Western Kentucky in this matchup also looks good for Western Kentucky statistically. So if you're looking at the stats, I mean, you're more than likely going to pick Western Kentucky here. And that's a big reason why the FPI is going with the Hilltoppers, is because statistically it's a good matchup for Western Kentucky. The spread's going with South Alabama by about 5 points because, I mean, if you look at the big picture, more than just stats, yeah, I mean, South Alabama's played better down the stretch. But yeah, this is a tough one, but I do think that Austin Reed is a big game, and in the end, I think Western Kentucky scores plenty of points. I think South Alabama scores some points as well, but in the end, it's not going to be enough. So give me the Hilltoppers 55%, over-under is 56. Give me the over. I can see this being a high-scoring potential shootout, and Western Kentucky to cover the spread in the end. So this is one of those sleeper games. I think this is definitely one of the games that people are overlooking. This should make for a pretty good bowl game coming up here on Wednesday. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.